We're getting into a conversation this morning, and I'm already breathing out, but we're going to get into it properly. The Senator for Busia County, OKIYA OMTATAH, is
from.
We had this conversation before.
You said,
and I said, and I actually said, I said it right before, didn't I?
You said from,
yeah.
And you were told no.
Okay,
Yes.
The Senator from Busia County is.
If I were you, I'd be safe. The Senator from Busia County.
The Senator from Busia County, because that's where he's from. OKIYA OMTATAH is here with us this morning. Good morning, Senator.
Morning.
How are you doing?
I'm pretty fine.
Pretty fine.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a good place to start this Monday, I'd say. So before we even tell folks, why you're here this morning, let's welcome you to the Situation Room in proper style. CT is in another country this week. He let you know where that is and the proverb, and then you can do us the good favor of interpreting that for us, right?
Okay.
I am actually in one of the wealthiest nations on the planet. But because of the incidences and the issues that some refer to as the curse of this continent, has never actually been able to realize that wealth to the benefits of its citizenry. This country is Zimbabwe. The proverb for the day is a proverb I've mentioned before because I actually like this particular proverb. Until the lion tells his side of the story will always glorify the hunter.
Yeah. And it's always said that victory is always written by
the victors.
Yes. So the story they tell is their story. But maybe we could look at an interesting story Achebe told of the tortoise and the leopard. Said the tortoise used to move around the village, the forest, claiming that if he can floor the leopard with one blow, he can beat the leopard to a pulp. So one evening, the leopard runs into the tortoise and tells him, Mr. Tortoise, here I am.
Beat me.
You can beat me. And the tortoise said, okay, that's a small thing, just wait. So the tortoise begins knocking down trees, turning over boulders and rearranging the scene. Then when he finished arranging the scene and destroying, then he lay on that place and told the leopard, you can now kill me. Then the leopard says, why? He says, whoever finds me dead on this scene will know that you met your equal. So the leopard ran away because he did not want to destroy his record as the most fierce animal in the forest. Mm-hmm. So that is a story whereby sometimes you have to define victory. You don't let others define victory for you. And so when the whole story is not told until the lion tells his side of the story, you end up with half-truths and a tunneled view of things. Sometimes a keyhole view, not even a tunneled view, a keyhole view of things. And sometimes you'll find when you're having this tunneled view, you could be celebrating that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and as they say, it could be a train which is coming over to crash you.
Exactly. And that's the light that you're seeing.
The light you're seeing, the headlamp of the train.
Coming towards
you.
Indeed. Well, there you go. So, no matter how thin you slice it, a story always has two sides.
Yeah.
And we're looking at sides of stories this morning. But one of the things, and that for which you're here this morning, to be able to open up for us, according to research and data collection that you have actually made, Senator, we start to have this conversation this morning, and it's around issues of odious debt. It's around issues of a Eurobond that comes due in a very, very short number of months. And we're looking at, let's just say this number, I think it's important that we do. 919 billion 450 million shillings. That's the same as 7.1 billion US dollars. It's the current exchange rate at 129, which was borrowed in the financial years of 2014, 2015, 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020, 2021. we also have an additional 208,324,847,510, and this was borrowed in February 2024. Now, this is money that is owed by Kenya and is up for paying back. Now, for matters of clarification, the money that was borrowed in February 2024 was for the purposes of paying back another Eurobond, which was the initial Eurobond. So that money was borrowed, essentially borrowed from Peter to pay Paul. And that happened. Now, under the Constitution, the parameters with which Kenya is allowed to borrow is for development. Now, the question then comes in, and as we start to have this conversation, can we see development for these monies that was borrowed between the years of 2014 and 2024? That's over 10 years. Kenya's current debt, which is being called odious debt in some quarters, is amounting to 13,114,602,305 Kenya shillings. Senator,
Yes.
you've called this, many quarters have called this odious debt. Odious debt, in simple terms, essentially means that Kenya actually doesn't owe this money.
Yeah, you don't owe this money.
Kenya doesn't owe this money, and we're going to start from looking at the mysteries around this Eurobond money, and how can we then say that such huge numbers, which Kenya borrowed, we see the evidence of the borrowing, but where it went to, we are not quite sure. Why are we calling this odious debt?
Yes, I think, first of all, the law defines how we should borrow and how money should be used. And also, now that we have begun with the Eurobond, if you look at table 5 of the computations I've shared, which is on table 5 is on page 11 of that document, it will show you. This is an extract from the government books on development expenditure, budget and statement of public debt. So when you look at that document on page 11, I've looked at those financial years when the Eurobond was borrowed. If you look at, go ahead, that's page number 5, you could, When you get there, you look at the 2014, 2015, the gross development expenditure was 494, and that expenditure, 494 billion, that expenditure, 358 billion was paid from taxes, 136 billion was loans. So if you add this, if you add the second column, if you add the third column, and the fourth column, that's tax revenue plus external loans, you get the development expenditure fully covered. But then you look at the Eurobonds that were borrowed, you see they were never factored into the government books. So the 175 billion that was initially borrowed, 207 billion, 214 billion, 113 billion, all this money does not get into the development budget. So why is this money? Because from the government books themselves, you can see that the budget, the development was taken care of by tax revenue and external loans, and the loans are given. Now, where did the Eurobond money go?
Let's just go over that again.
Yes.
Senator. So essentially what we are saying here is that there were certain development projects that were supposed to take place.
Yes.
These development projects took place and they were paid for from taxpayers' money, because we can see that money there.
Yes.
They were also taken care of by
the loans that were in the budget.
The loans that were already in the budget.
Yeah, approved by Parliament.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, when you bring in the Eurobond,
yes,
these monies essentially, under the borrowing that you mentioned, were actually supposed to take care of certain development projects. But we don't see that money has been applied to any project.
No, it didn't go to any project.
Okay.
So that's one of the issues that you have, and that one clearly shows that. Number two is that the Constitution controls how money is to be borrowed. And that borrowing is, when you look at Article 202 of the Constitution, it requires that any loan must be in the budget. And the reason for that is that loans are paid from taxes. But you have gotten some madness which has come in, and I use the word madness deliberately, that came into the National Assembly, and they came up with this thing called debt ceiling, which is just arrant nonsense. That you are computing debt against the GDP of a country. GDP really means nothing. GDP could mean that maybe that wealth is in the hands of maybe 10% of the population. 90% of the wealth could be in the hands of 10% of the population.
True.
And when you tax them, you're only going to tax them 30%. So that GDP that translates really to nothing. So usually taxes, debts are paid from loans. And the idea of a debt ceiling, you have to go back to about 1914, up to 1917, when the First World War was on, and the American government got involved and did not have time for Congress to be sitting to approve the budget. So they said, okay, go ahead, spend on need.
Yes.
When the war ended, Congress came back and said, okay, by how much have you spent? So they found that then they calculated that as against their GDP and said, we are going to give you that debt ceiling. And that particular problem is what has created the huge debt. America is heavily indebted. Mm-hmm. It's a heavily indebted country because they have never been able to go back to a state whereby Congress controls borrowing. Since the World War, then the Second World War also happened, that thing went on. That's why you find that they keep on going, they get to a point where they're about to shut down government, they have again to do this and that. So they have never gone back to the initial design whereby Congress, as the controller of the purse, was the one which allowed borrowing. They left it to the executive. So we go ahead and borrow that bad manners that has destroyed America and come here and put in our laws that 55% of our debt will be pegged on 55% of GDP. And then the executive now begins playing with that 55%, saying, okay, we are borrowing within 55%. But the law is very clear that any borrowing must be in the budget. That's Article 220, Clause 1, B, and C.
Are you saying it shouldn't matter then? They shouldn't. Then you don't. If according to what you're saying, if it is in the budget, then a ceiling wouldn't matter.
No, you don't require a ceiling because in the budget you have to demonstrate the capacity to pay.
So once you've been able to demonstrate that, then you shouldn't have a problem with the ceiling.
So you have to have a balance to pay, and that's why they say that the budget must have revenue and expenditure. Okay. So you must show your revenue and then your expenditure. That's 220. The first line, A1A is you have revenue and expenditure. Okay. So when they say you must create a balanced budget, then within that budget, the control mechanisms are inbuilt in the budget and Parliament approves. Okay. So the executive does not have a blank check to go borrowing the way Parliament has done by fixing a debt ceiling, which goes against the constitutional design of how government should borrow.
And this revenue that we speak of, is it actual revenue or anticipated revenue?
It's anticipated revenue, usually. It's estimates. Budgets are usually based on estimates.
Yes, and these estimates, the budget must also indicate how the government intends to raise this revenue.
Yes, it must indicate how it intends to raise this revenue. And that's why they say, in fact, if you look at... There's a document I shared that if you can open it, that one, the statement of actual revenue, the Gazette notice. If you go to the first page, you'll be able to see.
We'll find it,
I had shared it with the...
We have it.
Yeah, if you open the Gazette notice, that which gives us a statement of how the government's money is sitting at as at 25th of February 2025. And it was signed in law by Mr. Mbadi, you realize that the country is not doing very well from that statement. But again, within that statement, you'll also see that if you are keen, you'll notice how reckless our government can be. And I'm going just to point out one thing whereby the money was recklessly spent, and then you'd look at what was happening at that time in the political sphere, and people have been asking questions, how did you finance this, how did you finance that? But if you go into this document, you can easily see that circumstantial evidence points at this particular exercise.
What page was that, Senator?
No, it's a different document called Gazette Notice.
The Gazette Notice, exactly,
yes. Yeah. If you look at, that's okay. So when you look at that Gazette Notice, you will notice that it has got an open, on the right-hand side, there's an opening balance. There's tax revenue, which I've highlighted.
Yeah.
Now, there's an estimated tax revenue of 2.7 trillion, which is revised to 2.4 trillion. But look at how much has been collected. As by at the end of February, only 1.4 trillion.
1.4.
So we are doing very badly on that. Now, the non-tax revenue, these are the things that come from the dividends of various operations. Now, when you come to domestic borrowing, you'll realize that the entire amount is not in the budget. The entire amount of domestic borrowing, if you go look at the budget that the parliament passed, there's nowhere parliament has allowed the executive to borrow. Domestically. There's nowhere. The only thing that is allowed by law is the treasury bills, which are like overdrafts that should be paid within the year. It's like a bank overdraft, whereby if the government is having a cash flow problem, then it has to go to the market and borrow some money. But once KRA has collected the money and remitted, they pay back immediately.
So go ahead and do.
But we often hear, coming from the CS, during the budget, because we listen from beginning to end, that we hear that when the numbers have been given in terms of what it is that they would like to do as per the budget, and then when we hear where this money will come from, because they do make a statement about that before the appropriations bill comes later, and they do talk about domestic borrowing. So what I'm hearing you saying, Senator, is that they can say it, but if it is not documented, then it means nothing. Because when you look at Article 109, it says that Parliament shall exercise its legislative authority through bills introduced in Parliament and approved by Parliament and signed into law by the President. Not statements made.
Not statements.
Okay.
Parliament doesn't work on statements, on motions, on whatever. So when the budget policy statement, they're supposed to be a guideline. But you need to have that revenue declared in the budget. Then we can see what it is. So we need to see the domestic borrowing, because the reason why they don't declare that borrowing has to be tied on a project.
Okay. So this money that we're talking about, I think is important. This money that we're talking about now, this 828 billion.
Yes. Which they have raised, they revised upwards to 978 billion.
Okay.
In the third column.
It was revised to 978 billion.
Yes. And then
essentially we are saying that we don't know where this money went, but we can see that it was borrowed. And when we talk about domestic borrowing, we're talking about local banks and such.
Yes.
So where would this money have gone?
But you're also saying, that this money, if it was borrowed locally, was not in the budget.
Exactly. It was not
in the budget.
It was not.
So if it wasn't in the budget, then how did the government go about the process of actually...
Who gave them authority?
Yes, because Parliament gives that authority. Yes, meaning it is passed in the budget. If it isn't passed in the budget, so where did the authority come from for this borrowing to take place?
And pegged on that, when you go to a local bank, for example, call it, because we know that they all do, I mean, take your pick. Does the bank require a documentation of authority for borrowing from government before they give these funds? Is that a requirement? I
don't know if they require that, but the bank is out to make profit. And these things are, but government is the most secure thing to give money for profit. So they come, not just banks, when the scandal goes further, but you find that parastatals, which have been funded by the treasury, are lending government money. The money they have been financed with, they go and lend it back to government.
Okay. To itself.
By indicating by participating in the buying of these legal the legal paper that the government issues.
And then the tragedy is that the legal paper is supposed to be an overdraft to be paid back in 12 months.
Okay.
But if you look at our documents, there's even one that is written pre-1997.
Pre-1997
overdraft. Now, how can an overdraft be pre-1997? That's been 7 years ago. And it's a huge figure I'll show you in these things. But before we go, look at external loans and grants. That one is now in the budget. But look at the first column. The Parliament approved 571 billion to be borrowed. But look at the executive and the supplementary have revised it to 593. Who gave them the power to do that?
So if there was any revision, that meant it has to go come back to Parliament.
Yes. And now, of course, I borrowed that. Now, there's now I want to take you to another, to go down. I think it is on page, and that is why I want to show you some scam. This, you go to page 3.
Of the Gazette?
Yes, of the Gazette. You see, these are the repayment of the public debt.
Okay.
Consolidated Fund Services, CFS. You go down. Yeah, the highlighted. Yes. You have the CFS 50, that's the public debt being repaid. There was an estimate of 1.9 trillion to repay the debt. And now, remember how much have we raised up there? In taxes, about 1.4.
1.4 trillion.
Yes.
So, but now we have paid about out of that, we have paid 928 to debt.
Billion.
Yes. From our taxes. We have raised about 1.4 and about $1 trillion that's going to pay debt.
And we can see, Senator, we can see the trail that this money that has left and you can trace that this money that has left has actually come from the collection of taxes.
Yeah, from the collection of taxes.
Okay. Now,
look, I wanted to show you one thing. The CFS 52, the third item, salaries, allowances, and miscellaneous. Now, salaries, allowances, and miscellaneous are usually fixed figure.
Yes.
And here it is. The initial estimate is 4.209, 674, 431. Adjustment remains the same figure.
Yes.
But how much has been paid?
22
billion.
Where did the extra 18 come from?
It has come from your taxes. But what was happening around this time in Kenya? This is the time when Raila was running for the AU seat. And I'm suspecting that this is where the money that financed Raila came from.
Hang on a minute.
But Senator, you talk about salaries and allowances being a fixed figure.
Yes.
Here we talk about the extra 18.
Yes.
Which no one knows where it came from.
No one knows where. No, it came from the salaries.
No,
it came from the taxes. But who authorized and what did it do?
The additional.
What did this 18 billion shillings do?
So 18 billion shillings which existed was spent.
Has been spent. The limit that had been set was 4 billion.
4 billion.
But 22 billion has been spent.
So and the question we're asking
and we are talking of salaries and allowances. These are fixed figures. Salaries and allowances. And that's why even the estimates are not revised.
And our salaries and allowances are a fixed figure of
4.2 trillion.
But the thing is here that even when an adjustment was made, according to what you're saying, Senator, so there's the budget number, then, give or take a few things may happen. So you do an adjustment.
And that
with the adjustment, the figure remained the same.
Yes.
Now, when you go to the actual spend...
So then what did you adjust?
Well,
nothing was adjusted because
it's fixed.
It's usually fixed.
It's fixed because you have people who work in different government departments. You're not adding 100 people. You know who they are.
Yes.
You know what their salary is. It's a certain number. So you're able to put that in based on those numbers. So the question is here that how did this jump then from 4 billion to 22 billion within the same year? And we cannot see the requisite action for which that 18 billion shillings now is in this paper.
Like, for instance, we didn't see a surge in employment.
You didn't hire an extra 1,000 people into government.
Yes.
No, we didn't see that, did we?
Yeah.
No.
So this money, and this is the time when Raila was running around the continent. And my suspicion is that this is how he got financed. They used this vote head to finance Raila. Because they have not explained where. Because if you look at the budget, there was no budget for hiring jets, for doing all these things. Where did this money come from?
As we look at some of these numbers, the big numbers that Kenya has to pay back every year or so. And we're asking ourselves the question, these numbers, Senator, they're on public record. And the question is, why would I hide a bump of 18 billion shillings in clear sight, in plain sight, for anybody to see?
Well, I think that somebody is doing his work by keeping the record. And so it's up to us to make use of that record. The best some of these people can do is to say this is how things are. Then it's up to us to go and pick up this. And these statements are published every month.
Yeah.
This is the latest for February. Round for March has not come out. This is the latest statement we have. So you find people asking a lot of questions in the media and whatever, and yet the government is publishing these things. If you just take your time, pick them up and try to understand the law against the facts, then you begin seeing an unraveling of the realities before you see everything in black and white. And I just brought this up to demonstrate a simple issue so that the figures we are trying to mention, we are going to mention, people can understand that these figures are possible because they look impossible to the uninitiated. They look impossible. You talk of an audience debt of 13 trillion. Many people shut up. The mind shuts up, feels that you are telling them lies.
Yeah.
But if you look at it, that this is like a small section, you can see a bump of 18 billion has just been snatched from nowhere. You have seen domestic borrowings of very huge amounts of money that is not approved by Parliament. It's not tied to any project. It's just going like that. Then you can now, when you go now to look at the global picture of the debt, have demonstrated that all the Eurobonds in those years when they were borrowed, the budget was balanced, paid by taxes and loans approved in the budget, but somebody was taking the Eurobonds. Where has this $7 billion gone?
Okay.
It's not in our records.
I want to hold on to this 18 billion that we talk about, because essentially what we're saying is that 18 billion shillings has been spent.
Yes.
We do not know what it was spent on. It's saying that it was spent on salaries and remuneration, which normally is fixed.
Yeah.
If that was the case, the number before that would have been something at least close to 22 billion.
You have adjusted
would have been adjusted.
Yes.
That didn't happen.
Didn't happen.
We're seeing a couple of comments, and of course we're bringing in our audiences to all of these conversations that we have. And one person has said, what? Well, we hired 100,000 teachers, or we said to have hired 100,000 teachers along those lines in phases. Is it not possible that some of the new things that we are bringing in could attribute to this spend?
No, there's no new thing being brought in. This 4 billion is projected to cover all those hirings, whatever. They don't hire outside whatever. It's not
after
the
exactly.
plan.
Yeah.
So that's what was supposed to be projected to be sent at that point.
Right. So there is no explanation for this.
And please, Ministry of Health has its own, Ministry of Education has its own budget. TSC has its own budget. These ones are the charges of the consolidated fund. These are salaries like of judges. I think I need to clarify that. These are CFS salaries. Salaries of state officers.
Right. Commissions.
You have not added judges. You have not added commissioners. You have not added anything. And their allowances. These are not salaries of the ordinary worker, like teachers, like whatever. No.
Yes.
These are salaries that are direct charges on the consolidated fund of state officers, not salaries of government employees.
Yes.
That's why there are only 4 billion.
Because if they were everybody else,
yes,
it would have been much bigger.
Yeah, that's why there are only 4 billion. This is a fixed charge that doesn't even go to Parliament for approval. It's a CFS. A CFS stands for Consolidated Fund Services.
Why doesn't it go to Parliament for approval?
Because the Constitution has already said the salaries of judges and whatever will be paid from the Consolidated Fund. Direct. So Parliament only, when you look at Article 221 of the Constitution, I think it is Section 6, it says that after the estimates have been consolidated, Parliament shall make an appropriation act excluding these ones. In the Constitution, you exclude this from the budget because there are non-figures, there are fixed figures, and have already been determined. Like repayment of debt, they say debt will be, if you go to Article 214, says that public debt will be a direct charge on the consolidated fund. So it doesn't require appropriation. The people have already appropriated.
The due date comes, it is forwarded.
Yeah, it is forwarded.
So it does not require any other activity.
So what you need to understand in this scam is that these are salaries of state officers, not even MCS, not even MPs. These are category of state officers whose salaries are a direct charge, like judges.
Which means
like commissioners.
Which means, Senator, if we were to spend the extra 18, that would have meant we see close to 4 times the number of new state officers.
You need 4 times the number of new state officers. That's why I'm flagging it out as a big fraud on the people of Kenya. And it's here in plain sight.
Now, the monies that were collected by the Revenue Authority, as we have seen in this year so far, has been almost 1.4 trillion.
Yes.
And if we're seeing that monies that have been spent so far, the majority of that spend has gone towards the payment of debt. Because we know that's the first charge.
Yeah, about a trillion. About a trillion.
About $1 trillion has been spent on debt. Now, can we see who these debts were paid to?
Yeah, you can go down to most of these debts that were being paid. you need to look at another document. Another document that the Treasury usually publishes to show who the debts were. But when you go back to the original government, the original document that we were having, if you go back to that document, there's a place I have displayed, but I was making a different argument, which is on page 7 of the original document. That was external funding listed by donors for the 2014-2015 year. It's not the current one, it's the 2014-2015 year. So when you look at that, you'll see that the government of Belgium gave 800 billion in A&A, none in revenue, like that. It goes down and down. If you go further down until the end, it will tell you which ministry got what. Because under the Kenyan law, it's ministries which borrow.
Yes.
Okay. So a ministry comes out with its budget, with its proposal, then it's given, then it's consolidated at the Treasury and taken to Parliament for approval. But it's the ministries which borrow. So this one, this particular figure is given, and you can be able to know which debts are being paid by looking at the whatever. But the law is that all debts are a direct charge on the consolidated fund.
Should we be able to see very clearly that X amount of dollars came into Kenya, for example, under development, and these are the projects for which those dollars were spent?
Yeah, it's clear. It's clearly put out. In fact, when you look at the budget, the budget begins from the ground. It's a program-based budget in Kenya.
Yes.
So each of those borrowed loans are tied to projects, and you can see those projects. Whether the projects are executed well or not is a different thing. And I think I've been seeing some people, including my young friend Morara, has occasionally shown that the execution of this money was allocated in the budget, but this project is not running. That's a different story. Here we are looking at theft on the side of revenue, not on the side of expenditure. Theft through the budget. When you talk of budgeted corruption. Yes. So this money is usually approved, it's usually tied to projects, and you can be able to follow from the budget. You can go down and follow each project and audit it. And that's what the work the Auditor General is supposed to be doing. And so what I was looking here, what I was trying to demonstrate here is the fact that from my figures, Kenya does not have a debt.
How? You've just told us, Senator, that they have been under each, that ministries are the ones who borrow Kenya.
Yes.
And that you will then be able to see that monies having come in can be applied to different ministries, and that you will then be able to see in documentation what projects then received or would have received money.
Yes.
How do we then say that Kenya doesn't owe if you can see those lines?
Simple. The reason I'm saying that is very simple. From my research, you'll find that when President Kibaki left office, the public debt was about 2.7 trillion. When you look at the various appropriation acts over the last 10 years, from 2014 to November 30th last year, 2024, you find that Parliament approved about 2.3 trillion, which really fits in our borrowing culture. 2.7 handed over from the 50 years.
2.3,
2.3 over the 10 years, a bit high, but reasonable. We borrowed that. So that puts at about 5 trillion shillings. That is our public debt. But when you go to the repayment structure, you find that we have paid 8 trillion. We have repaid our debt by 8 trillion over the last 8 years. Our repayment of debt is 8 trillion. If we borrowed 5 trillion,
who are we paying?
We have repaid 8 trillion. Factor in about 15% interest rate. You'll find that we have paid 2.2 trillion over and above what we borrowed.
And still have a current debt of 13 trillion.
We have. I'm getting there.
Okay.
We have that 2.3 trillion that we have overpaid the debt by.
Yes.
Now, when you go to the Central Bank of Kenya records, they publish something called the Weekly Bulletin. When you look at the Weekly Bulletin that came out in December, giving us the data as per the last figures they had, they say we owe about 10.7 trillion. Okay? So here we have paid everything we owe in terms of the record, the proper record. Central Bank is saying we owe 10 trillion. So if I take the overpayment of the 2.3 trillion plus 10.7 trillion, I end up with a figure of 13 trillion as odious debt. Now, when I go back to compute the likes of the Eurobond and all these funny things that are borrowing outside the law, when I look at the statement, when I take the statement of revenue, a statement of actual revenue over the 10 years, and I also look at the budget that Parliament approved over the 10 years, and I subtract, I find that I can only account of, out of the 13 trillion, I can only trace 6.9 trillion in those figures. Another about 6.1 trillion is invisible, which means even the central bank is up to some mischief.
Let me ask, why do you say invisible?
Because you can't see where.
I can't see where it is. Central bank says our debt is 10.7 trillion. Okay? I've done the computation from what Parliament has approved and what was brought back. I've not interrogated whether the Kibaki debt was odious or not. I've taken it as a fact because it happened before the new constitution.
Okay.
So I've come to 2014. And remember, the 2013, when Uhuru came in, the 2013-2014 budget was done by Mwai Kibaki.
Yes.
And largely influenced by the old culture. So we come from 2014-2015. That's the budget I'm beginning to interrogate from, using the parameters in the constitution. And that's the time when also you get that the Eurobond has come in under Uhuru.
Okay.
You see. Then I begin to interrogate these things to say, now what is going on? How does the... And when you look at our constitution in Article 229, Clause 6, it requires the Auditor General to audit government accounts for lawfulness and effectiveness.
Right.
So using that parameter, lawfulness and effectiveness, I now come to audit the government books, to look at the government books and say, this year it was like this year it was like that. That's when I come out and find that we have overpaid our debt by 2.37 trillion. Central Bank claims in their own weekly bulletin that the debt Kenya owes is 10.7 trillion, which means the entire 10.7 trillion is an odious debt because you've already overpaid our debt. So I take this 2.3 trillion, I add to the 10.7 trillion, I get 13
which is
trillion.
Yes, right. Yeah.
Yes.
Which is the money that is odious. Then I take that 13 trillion and I say, okay, can I trace this 13 trillion from the records of the Treasury? Now, in the records of the Treasury, we look at, you see the document we looked at, that statement of the monthly statement of actual revenue and net expenditure.
Yes.
I take that document over the 10 years, the various, I get the total. I go back and I take the document that the budgets that the government has, the Parliament has approved.
Yes.
Then I do the mathematics. Then I find that of the 13 trillion, I can only trace 6.9 trillion in the odious debt.
Yes.
Because the Treasury records
Of the 13 trillion, only 6 trillion can be traced.
6.9.
So when you say trace, it means they went towards the functions for which they...
No, it was borrowed.
It was
It was actually borrowed.
It was borrowed illegally. Okay. It's an odious debt. The things I've been showing you when we began.
Of the 13 trillion.
Yes, I can see the 13 trillion. Like when you see that bump of 18 billion,
Yes.
it can be seen in the Treasury. That's a Treasury record.
Yes.
So when you get all those funny things, you find that they come to 6.9 trillion. Now, which means that 6.1 trillion of the 13 trillion is invisible. Now, that's when we need now to go back to the central bank and ask, na nyinyi, Have you also been incurring debt in your own way, in your own books, in a funny way? What has this money been doing?
Because essentially what we're saying here, Senator, is that if 6.1 trillion shillings had been spent, if it had been appropriated, if it had been tagged onto something, you would see it.
Yeah.
That's where the effectiveness part comes in.
Yes. You would see it. You would see these numbers.
Yes. But here it touches on the lawfulness of it, because first of all, how on earth did you go about getting this money?
Yeah. Because remember, the law of the land as well says anytime you borrow, it is tied to a specific project.
Yes, it is. It has to be.
Yes.
Well, beyond that, we're saying that in order for you to borrow, that it should have a development project. You can't borrow otherwise.
The simple law is this. For your daily expenditure, you want to pay salaries, you want to eat, you want to do whatever, the law says you must finance from your taxes.
Yes.
Cut your suit according to
your
cloth.
Yes.
You see. But should you want to develop, because the development means you'll be generating income later, you are allowed now to borrow for capital, for asset acquisition. Yeah. So, but for these transactional things, you have to, that's your issue. And even repaying the debt is considered a recurrent expenditure. So it's not, you cannot borrow to pay a debt. The way President Ruto purported to claim that he borrowed a Eurobond to pay a Eurobond. You can't do that.
I want us to look into the details of Eurobond and what exactly it means. It's a term that we throw about every now and then. We'll do that in just a while, but let's look at that from what the naked eye can see. I keep asking this question, that let's not even talk about 6.1 trillion shillings, Senator. Let's say 1 trillion shillings. If you were to put 1 trillion shillings into the development agenda in any sector in this country, as the naked eye would see, would you not see or feel the effect of 1 trillion shillings in development in the country?
You could have seen that. And in fact, the whole picture, if you use that standard, the whole picture, that's, I think you are invoking at section 15, clause 2, paragraph C of the Public Finance Management Act, which says that government borrowings shall be used only for the purpose of financing development expenditure and not for recurrent expenditure. And then it goes on to define development expenditure as acquisition or replacement of assets. You see. So, when you come there now, when you take the global picture, and that's, I think, if you look at my paragraph 16 on page 5, if you look at paragraph 16 on page 5, you find something very, very interesting to find when you now look at these things in terms of effectiveness.
Yeah.
So you find that we have spent 22 trillion shillings over that period, being 17 trillion in loans, 4 trillion in tax on development, purportedly. That means that in every year, if you divide that over the years, 22 divided by 10, you find that you have been spending 2.2 trillion on development.
And would you not see, if truly that was the case, according to these numbers, that's what it would mean, Senator. But if we were actually spending 2.2 trillion shillings every year on development, we would be Kenya would by now have fantastic infrastructure.
And now look at paragraph 18. That would be, would have given us 35 SGRs.
Yes.
22 trillion would mean Kenya would have built 35 SGR railways.
I think even when you talk about just 1 trillion that you're talking about, you're talking about 3 SGRs fully complete.
Every year. You see.
At the price that we were told it
At that price, which already was inflated.
Using 500 billion. So this is how people are playing around with this country. And that's why when we go forward, we must fix our finances.
Why do I get the impression that this is a very rich country?
No, Kenya is very rich.
Jermaine,
It is.
2.2 trillion shillings you're spending on infrastructure development every year. You're very rich. The question then, before I wanted to, because in the next hour we'll be looking at the Eurobond now, because this is money that Kenya owes. 117 billion shillings is owed in a couple of years, and it's actually months when you look at it, and then graduated thereafter in terms of what the Eurobond actually means. But then there's the question of what the Auditor General flags over and over and over and over again and says effectiveness, lawfulness has not been adhered to. Why do the flags that the Auditor General hoists all the time, why are these not adhered to?
Because the Auditor General violates the Constitution.
She does?
There's this document I shared. Maybe if you can get that paper where she was saying commercial banks have, that There's a newspaper article that I shared.
Yes.
I don't know if you have it, you can display it.
We do. We'll share it in the beginning of the next hour.
What I'm saying is that the Auditor General is supposed to audit for effectiveness, for lawfulness, and effectiveness. She never does that. If you look at the Auditor General's reports, it always concludes that we cannot tell. We cannot tell. We cannot tell. And you see, an audit report is supposed to be a complete document.
It should be conclusive.
Yes. It should be conclusive. So the Auditor General chooses to be vague.
It is from the Auditor General whose job it is. She is her office holds the responsibility of reporting of government spend. We know that the control of budget essentially says, yes, you may go ahead and spend. Now, after you've spent, the Auditor General comes in and says, okay, this is how you have spent. This is the money that we can find. This is what we cannot find. She goes ahead to say, actually, you know what? Maybe it wasn't actually used, and she leaves it as that, according to what you've said. Because one would expect that if you didn't spend it right, and when an audit report comes in, there would be recommendations that would be made in terms of, number one, then tell us how you actually spent this money, or if you didn't, show us where this money is. Should those be coming from her office?
Yes, and even sending matters to law enforcement.
But what we did hear her say just a few weeks ago, she said to Parliament directly when she was actually before the Senate, and she said that it is then up to Parliament to do the rest. These are words she said.
Yes, but Parliament does not audit. When you give Parliament an incomplete statement that we cannot tell whether the money was used effectively or not.
And then I leave it to you to
now, Parliament is not an auditing body.
So
tell Parliament this money was lost.
So essentially, you're saying that if it isn't conclusive in the manner that you suggested, then Parliament is crippled.
Yes.
What then do they pursue?
And Parliament has only 3 months to look at all the audits. You see, we should give us an audit. First of all, an audit report is supposed to be complete. A citizen like me should be able to use that report and act on it.
Should it not, then you're saying it should have action points, meaning given what I have documented, I recommend the following.
Yes.
Should she recommend?
She does not. She just says, Article 229 clause 6
Yes.
says an audit report. Maybe I should just read it out.
Yes.
So that I don't paraphrase it. I read it out and we say, because it's very, very important to get to understand where the problem really is. And maybe as I look at this up, you could also be looking up the other thing. And to look up the it's a 229 clause 6. If I can look at my statement, it says, an audit report shall confirm whether or not public money has been applied lawfully and in an effective way. Shall confirm.
Okay.
She did not confirm.
She has never confirmed anything. She gives us woolly reports. Parliament is not an auditing arm. Confirm to us in that report that this money has been lost. Then Parliament can say, okay, take this action, do the other action. Or me as a private citizen, invoking Article 1, acting directly, can then act on that report.
Okay.
Because the audit report cannot be reopened by Parliament. Parliament does not audit.
So that means, Senator, you're saying that the audit report that is submitted is inconclusive.
It's incomplete.
Okay. So, and why this is important, essentially, if we look at the genesis from where we started this conversation, is that we've come from the place whereby there is a huge amount of money that is, and we're going to put it in inverted, that it is owed, quote unquote, owed by Kenya. And we also know that debt is the first charge on any kind of revenue for the country. That's the first charge.
Yes.
We also go to the place whereby over the last 10 years, it has been seen that there's quite a lot of money that has been borrowed, but it has not gone to what it's supposed to go to.
In fact, we are paying 82% of our taxes.
Right. So for
go
every
to debt.
So for every 100 shillings that Kenya earns, 82 of those shillings goes towards
pay
paying
debt.
And so you then have only 18 shillings that's supposed to do the rest of all of these things.
Including paying salaries.
Right? Paying salaries. So now, in order to find out if truly the money that is owed owed by Kenya to all these other different entities is actually owed. This information then must come from the Auditor General, because she and her office do this report for the nation. And that's what we look like in terms of the trajectory.
Not only that, I'll read for you 229 clause 4, paragraph G. It says, within 6 months after the end of each financial year, the Auditor General shall audit and report in respect of that financial year on G, the public debt. The other day you saw the president putting together a task force to investigate public debt. What has been happening to this provision of the Constitution? You saw the other day the document I've shared. The Auditor General says, I have done a special audit over the last 10 years, and I've discovered about 1 point something trillion shillings in commercial loans cannot be traced. Were there no Auditor Generals over those 10 years?
There were.
Yeah.
Okay. And why are you not auditing Ruto? The 10 years she has audited is Uhuru. If you are doing a special, why have you left Ruto out? That is politics. Why have you audited only Uhuru? Ruto has been in power for 2 years. Why are you not auditing him? So when the Auditor General begins playing politics with us and publishing funny figures, we should not allow it. And also there's no room for those kind of audits. The law is very clear. Within 6 months at the end of each financial year, the Auditor General shall audit and report in respect of the financial year on the accounts of the national and county governments, accounts of all funds and authorities, whatever. Where is she getting the power to do the 10 years audit she's trying to tell us she's doing? Where are the audit reports for those 10 years? Who was the Auditor General?
Because
why did he audit those things?
So for each fiscal year of those 10 years, there actually should be an audit report on how the money was spent, and then what would then be recommended to be done should anything be out of place. Okay.
The only value that thing that was published, the only value it has for us is to tell us that the Auditor General is not working. If you can come and tell us that, okay, we've looked at 10 years, now we have found that so much was missing. What were you doing in those years? Okay. This is an office with perpetual succession.
What's one to do? What is one to do? This is an office that is tasked with the responsibility essentially of being the accountant for government.
Yes.
What then do you do if you're saying constitutionally that the complete cycle of this office's job has not been met over and over and over again? And what it equates to is that trillions of shillings then are unaccounted for.
To disband that office, the entire office, and set it up afresh. That's when people realize the enormity of the problem we have. We cannot be taken around in circles and people are dying in this country. Kenyans are running out to be slaves. Today, if you got a ship from Europe and it stands in Mombasa and says slaves required in Europe, you will not have room on that ship. Kenyans will run and fill, and some of them will be PhD holders, will be engineers, will be doctors. We can't allow that to continue. And if there's any swamp to be cleared, that's the swamp. Public finance.
Yes. Now, Senator, if you look at within 6 months of the end of each financial year, the Auditor General shall audit and report in respect of that financial year on. And I just want to look at Part G, the public debt and the accounts of any other entity legislation required the Auditor General to audit.
Yes.
Now, if we talk about just the audit of the public debt in the country with regard to the report that has come from the Office of the Auditor General, what is she saying with regard to that? Leave alone the audit of projects that have been done and those that have not been done well. Just her audit report on public debt.
Well, there's another form of admission that it is a bit scattered, but she's sort of admitting that money cannot be accounted for. Yeah. There's an admission that money cannot be accounting for. That's what we agree on. But I'm saying that, why is it coming so late in the day after Kenyans are complaining and what have you? She's now playing politics, and then you go and give us a report covering Uhuru Kenyatta, and you leave out Ruto.
But the odious debts that we speak of did not begin with Uhuru or Ruto, did it?
Enormously began with the enormity of it is that our debt, up to when Kibaki left, was 2.7 trillion.
Yes.
Right now we're about 12 trillion, depending on according, and you have said it's about 12 trillion. Now that spike in borrowing has happened under the Jubilee government and under the Kenya Kwanza government. And that's why you've seen in my petition, I'm suing Uhuru Kenyatta for a recovery of about 4.6 trillion. And I'm suing William Ruto for a recovery of about 2.3 trillion. So that's how we come up with 6.9 trillion, 4.6 and 2.3. That is 6.9 trillion that I've been able to trace in the Treasury's books that was borrowed under their watch, under their command, outside the law, and it cannot be seen what it has done. And I'm saying, Mr. Ruto, Mr. Uhuru, give us back this money. And I've attached the officials there who are working with you, the cabinet secretaries, the PSs, and stuff like that. So I'm saying, Mr. Ruto, Mr. Uhuru, give us back this money. We need it. The 6.9 trillion, we need it. That's what I've been able to establish from the treasury side of things. But then, of course, as I said, this other 6.1, which is even to me still a mystery because still in the central bank side, I've not been able to, because the central bank doesn't publish its accounts as much as the treasury is doing. And also you'll find that to the benefit of people who do this, the treasury has tried to be faithful to in terms of publishing the accounts monthly. They do that. And they do a words and all. They give us a words and all image of what is happening.
So there's nothing hidden.
From the treasury side.
It is up to you.
It's up to us to decipher it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Senator, we talk about these matters, the reports that we get, and even the public document that you share to us. It's something that is in the purview of the public, and these reports are equally shared with Parliament.
Yeah.
Over the years that you talk about, the 10 years, we have had Parliament. Has Parliament been party to the misdeeds that is befalling Kenyans today?
In terms of criminal negligence, Parliament has been very negligent. Because if Parliament approved only 2 trillion, 2.3 trillion, and under the Kibaki Parliament had approved 2.7 trillion, that comes to about 5 trillion. And the executive has paid 8 trillion. And the Parliament is approving those payments. The Parliament should be questioning it. You see? But somebody's not doing their work. And then you see the other thing now, like for me, I'm a senator. And these people have short-circuited the Senate out of the budget. So I'm just an observer like any of us. I have no voice in these matters in Parliament, officially. I have no voice. So that's why I have to go to court and litigate.
It would appear that matters are a lot graver than, just figures on paper. And that we don't see the damage that essentially these funds missing would actually do. And usually when we want to be able to see a loss, we have to then look at what these kind of monies would then be able to do. And that's how we can actually see that if it was
But even look at simple things like on Friday, maybe that will help people think I'm not crazy. On Friday, I won a very big case. Whereby, you remember when the NIC Bank and the Commercial Bank of Africa merged?
Yes.
Under President Uhuru's regime. They gave them an exemption from paying tax on the merger, on the assets. Now, the assets were about 700 billion. The bank is right now about 900 billion shillings worth in assets. At the time, it was 700 billion when it merged to form one bank. It became the third largest bank in Kenya.
Yeah.
Now, the tax was supposed to be 1.2% of those assets, which gives us 7 billion shillings, 7.4 billion shillings. Okay? Then the president, through Kuriyatani, gives himself a waiver. You see? So I went to court to challenge this thing. I said, how do you give yourself a waiver? What is the public interest here? So we have fought in court, and on Friday, 3 days ago, the court gave a verdict and agreed with me and says that waiver was illegitimate and the bank should pay the 7 billion shillings to the taxpayer.
Yes.
You see?
Okay.
So if that's a small transaction, that kind of money is being stolen from the public.
on a regular.
You can understand these huge figures, how they add up. And remember that Kenya's budget is bigger than the budgets of all the other East African countries combined. This is how rich Kenya is.
So repeat that again.
Kenya's
please.
budget is bigger than the budget of the other East African countries combined, except maybe the DRC, which has come in the other day.
DRC is, yes.
Yeah. But if you take Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, Tanzania, South Sudan, Somalia, whatever, their budget, when you add those budgets together, does not reach the size of the budget of Kenya. That's how rich Kenya is. And so we have to get very serious with this country.
All right. I want us to look now at, because one of the things that keeps hitting Kenya in the face is the Eurobond issue.
Yeah.
We're looking at 117 billion shillings that's owed in less than 24 months. And that is not, like I keep saying, is not an I beg kind of thing. You won't say, give me till next month. It's due, right?
Yeah.
Now, I want us to do a little bit of helping us understand a little bit more about the Eurobond and what exactly a Eurobond is. There are many of us who use this term and not quite sure. We just say Kenya owes on the Eurobond. First of all, let's start there and let's look at those numbers and essentially what those funds that came as a result of the Eurobond float then were used for.
So the Eurobond is just a market for commercial loans that issues bonds and to governments and other corporates, and it's usually dominated in these hard currencies. So you can go and buy. It's a commercial loan sort of market, a market for commercial loans. It's not like the bilateral loans that governments can negotiate with other governments and get favorable terms. So it's a commercial loan that you go and borrow. And basically that is what we are dealing with, that we have gone to this market and borrowed this money. But the Eurobond, you have to understand another thing is that before they went for the Eurobond, again, this is now the crime that Parliament committed. When you look at the Constitution, Article 206, it's very clear that all money raised by government must be deposited in the consolidated fund.
Yes.
Or in a fund set up by Parliament. It's excluded from the consolidated fund. Now, they went ahead and amended, I think, Section 57 of the Public Finance Management Act and introduced capacity for government when it borrows this money to keep this money in offshore accounts. You see? That the cabinet secretary can choose to keep the money in an offshore account. Now, that's Parliament now doing that, undermining the constitutional requirement. So right now, you can borrow money and keep it offshore, purported to pay people offshore.
And our constitution allows it.
No. Second, by the Public Finance Management Act, the amendments that were made in the Finance Act of 2015 Finance Act, 2014 Finance Act, there was a clause that was inserted in the Finance Act to amend the Public Finance Management Act so that the executive can borrow money offshore and open accounts offshore and keep that money in the offshore without bringing it here. Now what comes here is the debt, not the money.
And according to our laws, up until that amendment, stipulated that monies borrowed must find its way to the consolidated fund.
Yes.
All of it. So that Parliament can then super appropriate it and the control of budget can supervise how it is used.
Yes.
But now we borrow money, keep it out. The oversight institution of Parliament, the oversight institution of the control of budget have no access to that money. There's no oversight they can do. So the executive now runs its own show. The money is up. And whether those accounts are being used for the public good, you have no way of telling it.
But that is a very good thing, though. It is a very good thing. Because if it came into the consolidated fund, it would then form a cluster with all very many other funds that we have in the country. But for purposes of understanding an odious debt, have they not provided us with the perfect platform where we can determine? Because if it is in that account, we know it didn't reach here.
Yes.
But we know it was borrowed.
Yes.
So where did it go to?
That's one of the things we're
And how can you tell Kenyans to pay for it?
Yeah, can you pay for it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they have actually, it is a wonderful thing that they have done.
Yeah.
Yes, because now one doesn't have to grapple with looking at details of, okay, there was this consolidated fund, there are all these monies in it, so this one, where does it feature?
But,
they have separated it for us.
Because even remember, the law says you only borrow for development purposes.
Yes.
So here's the question where you've borrowed, it's in offshore accounts and ostensibly to be used to pay our debtors.
Oh, this is very good.
So,
Yes.
even as we look at all of these, we're looking at these numbers, one would ask the question that when you put such figures in this documentation, and I'm still using the 18 billion shillings as an example, and that when it is clear that some money actually didn't actually touch ground zero, ground zero being Kenyan accounts, it seems pretty obvious that that money is not available. You cannot see it.
Yeah, you can.
But they did. It seems as though this was done based on the fact that or rather based on the expectation that Kenyans actually will not read. And even if they did, they would not understand. And it seems as though these things were then hidden in plain sight, because the likelihood of anybody turning over the rock then is very low. It seems genius, because that's a way for you to be able to get away with murder, essentially.
Yeah, it is. And that unfortunate thing that it turns into deaths in this country. It turns into kids not being able to access education. Look at the mess in the universities now. It turns into us having dilapidated infrastructure. It turns into Kenyans being very, very desperate and not happy. They're just struggling. People are just living in poverty, extreme poverty. And then there's just a clique of suckers who are just sucking money out of this country, and they call themselves leaders. And they go around and they engage in a lot of tamasha to mesmerize us with all the opulence and what have you. So these are the things that we need to deal with. But when you talk of money being kept abroad, there's also another thing that has also come up.
Oh no!
In terms of the budget, and this one is in the budget, and this one's not being pushed by Western countries themselves. This thing called appropriation in aid. It's also another violation of Article 2, Clause 6, whereby loans, if you could look at page 7 of my document, you can see that table 4. Page 7. Page 7, page 7, page 7, page 7. Yes, table 4 and page 7. Look at paragraph 22. Paragraph 22 there.
There, okay.
Yeah. Now you look at now this one is an extract from the development expenditure for 2014-2015 financial year. I've just extracted it where it is and pasted it here. Now look at it is headed the thing in the document, the government document, the budget book, from the budget book, 2014-2015 budget book. The heading in the budget book is table 3, details of external funding listed by donors. That's table 4. Now, the first column has loan number.
Yes.
The second column has got lenders. The third column has got loan, then it's broken into A in AIA and revenue. Then there's the total amount. Now, AIA means appropriation in aid. It means the donor does not give money to Kenya. The donor gets people to come and do work in Kenya.
Yes.
Okay? So, like if you look at the government of Belgium, the Ministry of Education and whatever, you find there is 800 million, that's given. But there's no revenue. No revenue is coming to Kenya.
So money didn't actually come into Kenya.
No, it didn't actually come.
Yeah.
So the Belgians are saying, okay, we'll come into work in your country.
Yeah.
Show us where we can do this.
Yes.
It's like I'm lending you money to come and buy from my kiosk.
Yeah, but you're going to pay me back.
Yeah,
but I didn't actually give you the money.
Yeah. But how am I benefiting? My people are coming to work. I'm employing them.
They're getting paid.
I'm doing all those. I have no control.
They're paying taxes
on the costs. Back home. I have no control on anything. Parliament has got no say. So you'll find that it then goes to that. And when you run down, the government of Italy is 180 million. You go down and the total figure at the bottom on page 10 is 100 billion in A, that's the loans we are getting. Only 36 billion is cash given to Kenyans for us to plan with whatever. So at the total of 136 billion. Out of 136 billion, 100 billion does not come to Kenya.
But you're paying it back.
But you're going to pay, that brings just the loans are coming here. But we're going back. So we have got no control on the cost. We have no control on anything. They say, okay, so as you are planted, you shall come and plow and plant maize and harvest for you and do whatever. And then you'll pay us.
Okay, I need to understand. Okay, we're going to take another break, because I think it's necessary to breathe lest you burst something. But the truth here, so when we talk about MOE, we're looking at Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Energy and Petroleum and such.
Yeah.
So what we are saying is that if you borrow 136 billion, like we've seen has happened here, only about 36 billion shillings have you been able to see that actually comes in money that has been received across ministries.
Yes.
100 billion shillings is money that is paid to nationals of these different countries when they come in and do the work. They come in and they give their expertise, as it were.
Yeah.
You talk about consultants coming in to do 1, 2, 3. So when we actually see that they come here and they have these meetings, or like if the president goes out on a state visit, for example, and says, we have been able to have consultations whereby there will be development partnership between country X and Kenya, this is essentially what we're talking about. So when we are saying that loans have been secured to the amount of 100 billion shillings, that money is not coming here, but Kenya is paying it back. Now, is it possible to have conversations around this kind of borrowing that doesn't hinge on this kind of behavior? Because it is clear that it is keeping Kenya in a position of poverty, number one, and it's making it very easy for a lot of these funds to be misappropriated.
Yeah, and when you come and look at the various budgets and you look at the administrative component of these loans, which are paid to the nationals of these countries, is mind-boggling. So it's one area of massive theft, massive looting from our country by our development partners.
And should Kenyans be asked to pay that money back?
We should, but now, of course, this particular one is unfortunately in the budget Parliament has approved. So it's just Parliament which has not done its work to say, why are we doing this? But Parliament has approved this particular one. This one we have to pay. It's not an odious thing or anything, but it's an arrangement that is detrimental to this country. Because when you look at these loans, over 50% goes to administration, which means these people are living a luxurious life, they are going to these big hotels, they are doing then about a very small section then comes to the development itself.
Right. Let
them give us the money, we pay our people at the salaries that are commensurate in Kenya, we do our development. Or they keep this money. That's the position you have to
don't
reach.
loan it.
Don't loan it, because we are just being looted.
It's 25 minutes to 9 o'clock. The senator from Busia County, OKIYA OMTATAH, is here this morning, and we're looking at some of these issues. He says, don't loan it. If you can actually give it to Kenya, and then we show that it's actually going somewhere to do something for Kenyans, keep your money.
Yeah.
Keep your money. 25 to 9. We'll be back after this.
This is the Situation Room. The only way to start your day.
Save money on your rising electricity bill with StarTime Solar Home Solution. We offer a complete home and commercial energy saving system that includes solar panels with 15-year warranty, lithium battery with 10 years warranty, and an inverter with 5 years warranty. StarTime Solar Home Solution is efficient, reliable, and safe to power essential appliances, complete home lighting, refrigerators, air conditioners, washing machines, microwaves, iron box, instant shower, and entertainment devices, television, computers, Wi-Fi, and so much more. Say yes to reduced electricity bills and call us today on 0719 077 777 and get started on your green energy journey today. StarTime Solar. Power your life.
The weather with Spice FM.
Partly sunny conditions in Nairobi at 16, and it's 16 and sunny in Nakuru with 16 and partly sunny conditions in Nyeri. Eldoret is cloudy at 14 with 25 and partly sunny conditions in Mombasa. At 26, it is sunny in Malindi. 20 and cloudy into Kisumu with cloudy conditions at 17 in Kakamega. Rain showers continue in Kampala at 19, while Dar es Salaam at 24 is mostly sunny. It is clear at 14 into Johannesburg with sunny conditions at 27 in Mogadishu, and it's sunny at 15 in Addis Ababa, partly cloudy at 28 in Lagos with 23 and clear conditions in Kinshasa.
Spice FM. Nyeri. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 9 94.4 Spice
23 minutes to 9 o'clock. So, I mean, it would be if we're having a conversation on these numbers and we're looking at the real state of things, then it's possible that there's high stake espionage going on here, economic espionage going on here. And then the questions are, we can look at the numbers, Senator. We can say that there are gaps. We can say that there are problems here with misappropriation or mismanagement, or at the very, very least, misreporting. And we can talk about those and we can compare them to the things that we see that are not going right. Whether you want to talk about people living in abject poverty, whether you want to talk about, systems that you've set in place just not working because the money that should be sent to make sure that these things work is not happening. We can talk about all of that and we can establish that. But then the question is, what do? We must have conversations that are pointing towards solutions. And so what must happen? Because it seems to be a song that has been sung. You've gone to court, you've petitioned, you've asked for certain things to be done. I mean, your guess is as good as mine in terms of what's going to happen with the ruling that came out on Friday. That will we actually see that 7 billion shillings returned to the taxpayer? Or is it going to be an assumption that court orders are a suggestion? So what should be done in terms of moving forward?
I think what we need to do is very simple, is to implement the Constitution. Kenyans must come up and look at Chapter 12 and demand that Chapter 12, which is on public finance, is implemented to the letter, including separating the Treasury from the Ministry of Finance, so that, as contemplated in the Constitution, politicians don't have control of public money. The president should not have control of public money. Put all this money into the consolidated fund. Let the Law Society come up and help us clean out the laws, like those sections of the Public Finance Management Act that are letting people hide money out. Let them come up and help us clean out those sections and allow for, and allow for proper fiscal discipline to take place. Let us set up a sovereign wealth fund. We begin saving. Kenya is a country that should be giving loans to the IMF, not borrowing from the IMF. Kenya should give loans to the IMF, not borrow from the IMF. That's where we should be heading to. This country is heavily blessed. This country is heavily rich, right from the human resource to the natural resources. So let us get back and take control of Chapter 12 of the Constitution, implement that chapter to the letter, control public finances, and let those people who stole this money be held to account. Let us recover this money from wherever it is. It comes back here. There are many ways of recovery. We can give the Uhuru regime an amnesty. We can give the Ruto regime an amnesty and say within this time, return this money. We shall do nothing about it to you. We proceed ahead. But we need to sit across the table with each other, look each other in the eye and say, this is an existential threat to this country. And either we want Kenya to stop existing as a sovereign state, where we shall be under the debt burden and shall be slaves, or we want this country to be the free land of the people who are sovereign and who can manage their own affairs and who can stand up to any in the world. We have to make that choice. Either we want to be slaves or we want to be free people. And if we want to be free people, we must sit across the table and say, where did the rain begin beating us and how do we dry ourselves now that we are soaking? Yes.
Is it possible to trace? I mean, we talk about having a footprint across board. The money that is not seen, can it be traced down to the individuals who made the order for certain monies to be moved from point A to point B? Is that possible?
Very possible. And it's a question of political will. And that's why Kenyans have now to take their politics very seriously and see whom do they give power to govern. And if they give power to the right person to govern, he'll be able to fix these things. It's called for political will, and that political will that understands politics as a call to service. Politics as a call to service. If that understanding is made, then we will be able to get to a point whereby whatever happens, Kenyans will be able to recover themselves. And we have also to begin defining our friends. A lot of these countries we call our friends, are just our enemies that are stealing from us.
Let me ask this question. If we can legally prove the wrong that has been committed in the acquisition of these debts, would it give us an adequate platform from which to start a softer way of looking at it, renegotiations?
First of all, there's a whole doctrine of odious debt. It's called the doctrine of odious debt in international law.
Yes, it's by somebody called Alexander Nahum Sack.
Yes.
Yes.
And it begins with when the Americans kicked the Cubans and then the Spaniards out of Cuba.
Yes.
The Spaniards had shackled Cuba with debts. And so they said, okay, Americans, you are the new masters, you pay these debts. Americans said, we are not going to pay debts that did not benefit Cuba. You took these debts to benefit yourselves, and Cuba cannot pay it. And that's how the doctrine of odious debt begins. And recently in Mozambique, over there, if you heard of the tuna gate, the tuna scandals, with the Eurobonds that were involved, were secured on tuna prospects, civil society groups in Mozambique were able to go to the High Court of Mozambique, and some went to the European Court, and they got orders that said that debt was odious, and the people of Mozambique should not pay. Some of these things we have to litigate, and that's why I've gone to court on this 13 trillion, trying to ask our High Court to declare it as an odious debt. Then from there we begin negotiating. Do Kenyans pay an odious debt?
In fact, the SAC doctrine of 1927 can be summarized quite simply. There are 3 points that one looks at. Whether this particular debt was incurred with public consent. If it wasn't,
Yes.
whether it was used for public benefit. Thirdly, whether the lenders knew or should have known that the funds would be misused.
Yeah, the obligation of the defender, the duty to care by the lender.
Yes, exactly.
The duty to care.
Now, in our case, from everything we presented, these are things that can be proved.
The three of them, for all the three.
Yes, they can be proved.
Yeah, and when you talk about it being proven, there's now the aspect of the law that you say we must respect and uphold and implement the Constitution, which then brings about the institutions that the Constitution gives. Yes. Now, here we talk about the Attorney General as the chief advisor of the government. What are some of the agreements that the government enters with those that gave us this debt? Now, LSK, in terms of shaping up the entire legislation and making sure that people do not take advantage of the loopholes in the law. Now, we talk about the CS of Treasury. What kind of engagements does he have on behalf of the government and making sure that policy is put in place to make sure that Kenya is not stolen from, as well as CBK? You say CBK as well in its report seems to be having loopholes in it. How do we seal that from the government perspective? But then again, we go back to Parliament. Who are the people who audit these reports and go through them? How then do we ensure that all these institutions play ball in the same courtyard for the benefit of the people of Kenya? I think that summarizes what needs to be done.
Yes, I think so. But there's a wake-up call for all Kenyans.
You know, Dennis, what you say is absolutely true. It will be part of the entire process of understanding odious debts and dealing with it.
Dealing with it, yes.
One of them, again, will be restructuring of our financial systems.
Yeah.
Because in the absence of that, these are things that can be perpetrated again. Remember that little loophole that was brought in? That little loophole. It is one of these hidden blessings that we have. Because in bringing that loophole...
I like the way you're looking at it.
Yes, it is. Because they went and exposed this thing in ways that nobody else could have exposed it. How do you take money from a sovereign state which has a system through which it receives money, create a new one that is opaque? How can that stand in the bright glare of any legal process? Does that not seem to indicate nefarious intent?
I mean, even city that we are borrowing money, but people who are implementing the projects that will benefit the people of Kenya are the lenders themselves. I mean, how do we pay citizenry who are not Kenyans and they pay taxes back to their country?
By the way, when it comes to borrowing from other countries, let me explain this to you. It's actually an economic question. and the response is also economic. When people give you a grant, or grant mostly,
Yes.
it doesn't involve money directly. It involves equipment, it involves personnel.
Yes.
It's part of the loan. Now, it has been the practice for the longest time. But this goes back to our negotiators.
Yes.
The people who we've asked that question here many times. Who are these people?
Who are the people who are sent to negotiate
these
on
things
part of
for
the
us?
on behalf of the
Because
country?
when you look at the outcome, you have to ask, what on earth did we negotiate?
Or did you go in intentionally with, did you go with that intent to bungle the thing
And that
from
was
the
the
beginning?
failure. One of the big elephant in the room is the professional organs,
Yes.
the professional bodies. Like something happened in Uganda the other day that really excited me. There was a judge who was very corrupt, but the system protected this judge. The Law Society of Uganda withdrew the practice license.
If you're not going
Of
to
the
sack him,
judge,
let's
yeah.
now
Yeah,
not make it
now he's
possible for
not
him to
nobody.
practice.
So he
Yes.
can't practice.
You can't practice.
practice.
You see, so if our professional bodies were to crack down on the Attorney General, you are the Attorney General of Kenya, you are a member of the Law Society.
Yes.
Okay, you are an advocate. How did you sign on to this? You are an engineer. You're a member of the Engineer Society of Kenya, whatever it's called. How did you certify this road?
Okay.
How did you do this? So if the professionals stand up, that's the prophetic voice. In the Bible, in the Old System, we used to have the priest, the king, and occasionally the prophet.
The prophet. Yeah.
So the prophetic voice today is the professional who should come up and say this is substandard.
But where the problem arises, Senator, is that many of these professionals are complicit. So there are certain things you cannot do without the input of professionals. You cannot.
Almost everything.
Yes.
You can.
So if they're complicit, do you think they're going to sit back and allow the process that we're talking about to take place? They will fight it. If you are the Attorney General, do you really think, because everything we are saying comes back to, all right, we signed off on this. The Attorney General is the advisor of the government on these legal matters. Did they not understand the laws that pertain to these things and the pitfalls that we were hurtling towards? How did they allow us to pen our names on behalf of the citizens of this country on such a thing? How?
You see, like I'm having an issue in my county. The governor and this group decided to deny me access to source documents and what have you. So we are litigating against him because I want to be able to access source documents of the document. I don't want to go out and talk to at funerals and entertain people that, hey, the governor is this, the governor. I want to have this kind of data. So they would deny me source documents. I'm in court trying to get the source documents. But outside that, I've decided to do some audit, and I've been able to access the vote book from the IFMIS and what have you. When you go through these documents and you look at Dr. General's report, you really get sad.
Why?
Because what has come up to my eyes is that about 4 billion shillings in the financial year 2022-2023 in Busia cannot be accounted for. What has been misappropriated?
It can't be accounted.
Cannot be accounted for or will not be accounted for.
Well, to be accounted for, must be. If the law takes its course, somebody will go to jail.
Yes.
You see something like tea and snacks in the governor's office.
Tea and snacks.
Yeah, was given about 3 million shillings in the budget.
Okay.
But when you look at the payment, if you look at the IFMIS vote book, the tea and snacks as a code has been paid 5 times just by changing the code. The title remains tea and snacks, but the code has been changed by 1 digit or 2 digits. They paid 5 times and they pay over 20 million.
For tea and snacks.
Yeah.
tea and
So which
That's a
turns
lot
to
of mandazi.
about 2 million shillings on mandazi.
Yeah.
That's a lot
In a month.
A lot of tea and mandazi.
So these kind of things are there, and when you do all through them, but when you go and look at the Auditor General's report, she never examined the vote book. She didn't even follow the law when I was auditing, because the law requires that the accounting officers, the individual heads of the various ministries, should send their report by 30th of September.
Yes.
Then the Minister for Finance in the county consolidates also their reports and makes their summary and sends their report to the Auditor General. Now you look at the audit of Busia, there are no reports from the individual
Ministries.
ministry, so you cannot see what I can build this. So there's this sanitized report that has come from the global one that has come from the office of the finance minister,
Yes.
is the one that is being interrogated. When you look at it, it's not containing a lot of money that has been raised in the county. And then the auditor goes and clears it. You see. So when you look at the statement of when you look at the statement in that audit report, the statement of pending bills. From I don't know whether it was a mistake or whatever, but the report that the auditor has approved. You look at that statement, you find that Busia County, if you put that statement on a spreadsheet, Busia County has overpaid pending bills by 44 million.
Has overpaid.
Okay.
And yet
they are claiming they have pending bills of 1.9 billion.
You see, when we talk about this, because to really speak in terms of the gatekeepers, but when you talk about the ministries submitting their reports, which begs to ask the question, where are members of the county assemblies? Because they're also sleeping on the job. I mean, it's a question of each and every single person just playing their role and making sure that right is done.
county assemblies, from what we have seen, cannot be relied on to play an oversight role. Because if they were,
yet they should.
Some of these audit queries we keep, they are the ones who raise these audit queries long.
And I don't have the signature.
Yes.
Like me as senator, I have no signature in the county. I have no power really in the county.
Yes.
It's the MCA who has got the power to approve the budget.
Yes.
Who have the power to do the supplementaries.
Yes.
Who signs on everything. But then you find that it's not there. But for Busia, I'm keen to get to the bottom and to make it an example of how a county should be run. And I'm working on that diligently. And I hope that I'll win my case and get the source documents so that I can weave my rag.
There's something that I hear from everything that you're saying, Senator, and that is our members of parliament actually have the tools with which they can actually audit the financial goings on in this country. The auditor's report would assist, but the committee in parliament that deals with the finance could access the same source documents as you do and would be able to even query and interrogate the auditor's report from a position of knowledge. But is this what happens?
No, it doesn't.
So the complicity of parliament is actually enhanced.
Yes.
Because if you neglect to carry out your duties in the fullest manner that you can, if one accuses you then of criminal negligence, they are right to do so.
Yeah, it is criminal negligence. Yes. People die.
I am looking at countries that have actually had cases of ODS debt and have won. Oh, there are quite a number actually. The US case in 1898, the Treaty of Paris is what declared that they said, this thing, you're not paying it. Costa Rica in 1923. South Africa in post-apartheid. They argued that money that was acquired by this apartheid regime, forget it, we are not going to pay this thing. It was negotiated. If you look at Iran, some people said this thing at Saddam Hussein acquired this on our behalf. We're not paying. Ecuador, we're simply saying, and then we come to this continent, we look at Mozambique, cases have been won. And winning here means whatever it is that was claimed you should pay, you did not need to pay. And that's when the negotiations came in. Now, our case, when you look at the details, my goodness gracious me, do we have a case?
We have a
very strong case.
Yes. But you need political will.
Yes.
You need political goodwill.
There's so many things that
must elect the correct politicians.
Right. There's so many things that bleed one into the other, Senator. And even as we talk about the oversight role that certain bodies play, there's something you mentioned earlier, and you talked about just being a mere observer. But we know, for example, that the role of oversight falls squarely in Parliament, namely the House of Senate. So do we see as robust an effort as is necessary for some of these things that we talk about?
And that's why I went to court, because my governor says I cannot give you source documents. Wait for the Auditor General's report. And I say I'm elected to represent the people of Busia.
Yes.
Article 1, Auditor General is Article 229, but Article 1 says the people have donated power to me as a representative.
Yes.
So I want to be able to, in real life, to see that if you are going to do a borehole, like right now there's a place called the Kapina in my place, I got a report that they're equipping a dry borehole. A borehole is supposed to be 200 meters. You go and you wait for the rains to come. Then the surface water accumulates somewhere on the rock. Then you drill a well that is 40 meters.
And
Then you pump. Then you equip it. Then the women dance for you, as they usually do. Then you go, you say, you have done a borehole. When the sun comes, kidogo,
that water is gone.
Yeah. For me to do an audit of that borehole, I want to know what are the source documents? What was the contract? How many meters was this person supposed to drill? And how many meters did the person drill? So that when I now come to the Senate, I have that information. And now I can even ask the Auditor General and say, during your audit, and I write to the Auditor General.
Yes.
I say, during your audit, go and look at this thing. Like in the last audit, there was a jalopy that was bought. In terms of supplying the county. The people who are receiving at the last administration refused to receive it. Then the new government comes in, they pay for that thing.
Again.
Yes, 13 million shillings.
One.
Yes, but when you go to Isuzu, Kenya, the vehicle brand new is 5 million.
Wonderful.
A jalopy have paid 13 million. Now, at least that one, because of my complaint, the governor, the auditor has flagged it and captured it. But I wrote a letter saying, can you look at this thing? You see. Now, if there was a way that, and you see, the sad thing that I'm a senator, and I'm crying about accessing documents in my county, I've gone to court to look for orders to be allowed, and yet we're supposed to having open governance where these documents are on the internet.
Yes.
Our time is coming to an end, Senator, and I hear you say, no, please don't be sorry, because, it seems like it's not enough for us to be able to exhaust all of these things, but there must be something in terms of a drop message that has to come out from you today.
No, I think that the salvation is the rule of law. Let us take time to understand our law and demand that those who govern us using the law. And
we are fortunate that we actually have the laws.
Yeah, we're very fortunate.
That can actually support what it is that is being said. We do. We are actually fortunate. We do have laws. Yes.
The Senator from Busia County has been our guest this hour, looking at all of this. It's a lot. And I think even those 2 hours sometimes is not enough for us to look at these things. It's necessary for them to come out in the open so that we are aware of what is going on. And then it gives an impetus for something then to be done about it. I want to thank you very much for being in the hot seat this morning. We look forward to further conversations with you.
Thank you.
Asante sana.
Be blessed.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.